Kita is nearly 3. Eve Clark wants to find out how she manages the relation between words and concepts.
I have a fruit flower.
And the problem the child has to solve is which concepts go with a word and which ones get grouped together maybe, or with a whole set going with a single word, which concepts maybe are broken up among several words. And working out that mapping relation between concepts and words can take quite a long time. On my side, I've got a balloon tree. What have you got?
I've got a pencil on my tree.
And what have you got on this one?
Orange.
Okay. Now on mine... Well, each time when I held up a card and said what I had on mine, I used a compound now when I described it. So I would say I've got a pencil house, with stress on pencil and less stress on house. She very consistently used compounds.
A tree house.
For talking about the two pictures on her side of the card. So, for instance, she said a tree house and a pumpkin house when she looked at the two pictures of the other houses. In the picture, the tree and the pumpkin are not really separable from the house. They're made into houses. But there was one picture where they were really two separate entities. Now, on my side, I've got a book chair. What have you got?
I've got a duck on my chair.
You've got a duck on your chair. I said that I had a book chair, which was a picture of a chair with books lying on top of it. And on her side, there were two chairs, one with a duck sitting on it and one with spiders on it. And she said, instead of saying that it was a duck chair, so that I've got a duck sitting on my chair. And this typically happens when the two objects are not intrinsically related or part of the same thing. So that, in fact, with other 2- and 3-year-olds, we find very consistently that if objects can be thought of as being subcategories, members of the same category, so they're all kinds of houses or all kinds of chairs, say, then children are more likely to use compounds to describe them. But if they're really two separate things that are in accidental juxtaposition, then they will use a phrase or a relative clause or some other kind of description.
Eve Clark tried a more complex task with 4-year-old Melissa, changing word endings to form compounds.
What they seem to learn first is that you can put two words together to make a compound word, and that this can be used for naming categories. Then they discover there are lots of different endings in English, like ER or ING, which can also be used to coin words for people, for instruments, for objects of various kinds. A machine that builds walls, yes. What do you think we could call it?
Machine builds walls.
A machine builds walls? Okay. So, could we call it a builder, too? Then adults, given these sorts of cards, will reliably say, for example, for someone who builds a wall, that he's a builder. Or someone who breaks bottles, that he's a breaker or a bottle breaker. Young children, when they first start coining words like this, will come up with things like a build wall, which has compound stress on it, so that it is indeed following the kinds of patterns of words that you get in English. But of course a build wall you would assume was a kind of wall, not a person who builds walls. And it takes them a little while to learn that you mustn't say a build wall, but a wall builder, or a builder, in that sort of situation.
Not all children develop these skills in the same way at the same rate. Styles of acquisition have been studied by Elena Leven.
Some children will actually put two words together in a very highly organized way with some kind of underlying rule for how the words ought to be ordered right from the very beginning, the minute they start using more than one word in an utterance. Others seem to learn utterances as whole chunks and perhaps use those chunks for quite a long time without necessarily starting to have rules for putting single words together.
Honey.
Yes.
Does he like Daddy Bears?
I think so, yeah.
Oh,
Turn
God.
the page again.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
If you think about a 2-year-old who will be speaking with one word at a time or in rote-learnt phrases, these children are already producing very complicated utterances.
They've forgotten the monkey.
For instance, Kita says, "You've forgotten the monkey," which is actually really quite a complicated sort of sentence.
Oh, yeah.
Good spot by spot.
Just in terms of the sheer syntax of the thing, she's doing something really considerably more advanced than she would have been doing even 4 or 5 months ago. speech. And one of the most fascinating things that you see as children go through this third year is the way in which they start to put into the utterance all the bits and pieces that previously they had to rely on external context or on another speaker or on scaffolding for.
No.
What's under the bed?
A crocodile. What a doll.
There's Spot under the rug. I think we missed a page there.
Oh, no.
I think we missed a page, Joe. We missed the monkey again. Is he in the box?
Oh, no. No, we didn't miss a monkey again.
Didn't we?
No.
The other thing is the ease with which they're carrying on a conversation that moves in and out of the present.
Oh, what's in the box?
I've got a bear apple.
Have you?
Yes.
What's he eating?
She can talk about, I've got a bear at home quite easily. Now, that's something that, again, she would have had to have said bear and rely on someone else to say, have you got a bear at home? Or, yes, you have got a bear at home, haven't you?
What do you usually have?
Just Spot.
Just Spot, nothing else.
No.
There are rules that are available to all children in some sense for helping them to work out the grammar of the language that they're learning. But what I'm trying to argue is that how children use those rules may vary. The strength of particular rules may vary for different children.
Is he behind the door?
No.
What's behind the door?
A teddy bear. A big teddy bear eating honey.
One thing that's quite plain is that if they take the view that everything depends upon the early learning of the world, as to say, acquisition of world knowledge and acquisition of, how shall I say, social skills, interactive skills, and pointed gestures and vocalizations, those people tend grossly to overlook the complexity of language as its own problem space. You may know a lot about the target world, but you still have got to know how to handle the preterite and when to use a definite and an indefinite article and that kind of thing. That's still a problem space.
Learning to build grammar is a complex and highly abstract problem. These 3- and 4-year-olds speak English. By studying other languages, say Turkish or Russian, languages with lots of inflections, the problem facing the developing child is even more apparent. We asked a specialist in cross-linguistic analysis to explain, Dan Slobin.
But we must remember that the child doesn't come into the English-speaking world ready to hear separate English words. The child hears a stream of sound. It's rather hard to realize that in your own language, but let me give you an example from another language. Say, in Turkish, if you wanted to say something like the cat is on the mat, you would say, Kedi halının üstünde. Now, I would imagine if you don't know Turkish, you don't even hear the words. If I were to write it out as a series, would have Kedi halının üstünde. But the Turkish-speaking child, from hearing these words separately and in a number of different utterances, begins to hear that there are separate words. We'll hear that there's kedi, which means cat. There's halı, which means rug or mat. There's üstün, which means top. And some other little pieces. There's a piece here, de, which means something like at. And there's a piece here, nun, which is like the possessive s. It means something like the cat, the mat's top at. The cat is at the top of the mat. That already requires a whole perceptual apparatus for language processing. Hearing